After a few words to Pierre about the awful roads from the Polish frontier, about people he had met in Switzerland who knew Pierre, and about Monsieur de Salles, whom he had brought from abroad to be his son's tutor, Prince Andrei again joined warmly in the conversation about Speransky, which was still going on between the two old men. If there were treason or proofs of secret relations with Napoleon, they would have been made public, he said with warmth and haste. I do not and never did like Speransky personally, but I like justice. Pierre now recognized in his friend a need with which he was only too familiar, to get excited and to have arguments about extraneous matters in order to stifle thoughts that were too oppressive and too intimate. When Prince Meshchersky had left, Prince Andrei took Pierre's arm and asked him into the room that had been assigned him. A bed had been made up there, and some open portmanteaus and trunks stood about. Prince Andrei went to one and took out a small casket, from which he drew a packet wrapped in paper. He did it all silently and very quickly. He stood up and coughed. His face was gloomy, and his lips compressed. Forgive me for troubling you. Pierre saw that Prince Andrei was going to speak of Natasha, and his broad face expressed pity and sympathy. This expression irritated Prince Andrei, and in a determined, ringing, and unpleasant tone he continued, I have received a refusal from Countess Rostova, and have heard reports of your brother-in-law having sought her hand, or something of that kind. Is that true? Both true and untrue, Pierre began, but Prince Andrei interrupted him. Here are her letters and her portrait, said he. He took the packet from the table and handed it to Pierre. Give this to the Countess, if you see her. She is very ill, said Pierre. Then she is here still? Said Prince Andrei. And Prince Kuragin? He added quickly. He left long ago. She has been at death's door. I much regret her illness, said Prince Andrei, and he smiled like his father, coldly, maliciously, and unpleasantly. So Monsieur Kuragin has not honored Countess Rostova with his hand? Said Prince Andrei, and he snorted several times. He could not marry, for he was married already, said Pierre. Prince Andrei laughed disagreeably, again reminding one of his father. And where is your brother-in-law now, if I may ask? He said. He has gone to Peter's, but I don't know, said Pierre. Well, it doesn't matter, said Prince Andrei. Tell Countess Rostova that she was and is perfectly free, and that I wish her all that is good. Pierre took the packet. Prince Andrei, as if trying to remember whether he had something more to say, or waiting to see if Pierre would say anything, looked fixedly at him. I say, do you remember our discussion in Petersburg? Asked Pierre. About... Yes, returned Prince Andrei hastily. I said that a fallen woman should be forgiven, but I didn't say I could forgive her. I can't. But this can be compared, said Pierre. Prince Andrei interrupted him and cried sharply, Yes, ask her hand again, be magnanimous, and so on. Yes, that would be very noble, but I am unable to follow in that gentleman's footsteps. If you wish to be my friend, never speak to me of that, of all that. Well, goodbye. So you'll give her the packet? Pierre left the room and went to the old prince and Princess Mary. The old man seemed livelier than usual. Princess Mary was the same as always, but beneath her sympathy for her brother, Pierre noticed her satisfaction that the engagement had been broken off. Looking at them, Pierre realized what contempt and animosity they all felt for the Rostovs, and that it was impossible in their presence even to mention the name of her who could give up Prince Andrei for anyone else. At dinner, the talk turned on the war, the approach of which was becoming evident. Prince Andrei talked incessantly, arguing now with his father, now with the Swiss tutor de Salles, and showing an unnatural animation, the cause of which Pierre so well understood. Chapter 22. That same evening, Pierre went to the Rostovs to fulfill the commission entrusted to him. Natasha was in bed, the Count at the club, and Pierre, after giving the letters to Sonia, went to Maria Dmitrievna, who was interested to know how Prince Andrei had taken the news. 10 minutes later, Sonia came to Marya Dmitrievna. "Natasha insists on seeing Count Peter Kirillovitch," said she. "But how? Are we to take him up to her? The room there has not been tidied up." "No, she has dressed and gone into the drawing-room," said Sonia. Marya Dmitrievna only shrugged her shoulders. "When will her mother come? She has worried me to death. Now mind, don't tell her everything," she said to Pierre. "One hasn't the heart to scold her. She is so much to be pitied, so much to be pitied." Natasha was standing in the middle of the drawing-room, emaciated, with a pale, set face, but not at all shamefaced, as Pierre expected to find her. When he appeared at the door, she grew flurried, evidently undecided whether to go meet him or wait till he came up. Pierre hastened to her. He thought she would give him her hand as usual, but she, stepping up to him, stopped, breathing heavily, her arms hanging lifelessly just in the pose she used to stand in when she went to the middle of the ballroom to sing, but with quite a different expression of face. "Peter Kirillovitch," she began rapidly, "Prince Bolkonsky was your friend, is your friend," she corrected herself. It seemed to her that everything that had once been must now be different. "He told me once to apply to you." Pierre sniffed as he looked at her, but did not speak. Till then he had reproached her in his heart and tried to despise her, but he now felt so sorry for her that there was no room in his soul for reproach. "He is here now. Tell him to forgive me." She stopped and breathed still more quickly, but did not shed tears. "Yes, I will tell him," answered Pierre, but he did not know what to say. Natasha was evidently dismayed at the thought of what he might think she had meant. "No, I know all is over," she said hurriedly. "No, that can never be. I'm only tormented by the wrong I have done him. Tell him only that I beg him to forgive me for everything." She trembled all over and sat down on a chair. A sense of pity he had never before known overflowed Pierre's heart. "I will tell him everything once more," said Pierre, "but I should like to know one thing." "Know what?" Natasha's eyes asked. "I should like to know, did you love—" Pierre did not know how to refer to Anatole, and flushed at the thought of him. "Did you love that bad man?" "Don't call him bad," said Natasha, "but I don't know at all." She began to cry, and a still greater sense of pity, tenderness, and love welled up in Pierre. He felt the tears trickle under his spectacles, and hoped they would not be noticed. "We won't speak of it any more, my dear," said Pierre, and his gentle, cordial tone suddenly seemed very strange to Natasha. "We won't speak of it, my dear. I'll tell him everything, but one thing I beg of you. Consider me your friend, and if you want help, advice, or simply to open your heart to someone, not now, but when your mind is clearer, think of me." He took her hand and kissed it. "I shall be happy if it's in my power." Pierre grew confused. "Don't speak to me like that. I'm not worth it," exclaimed Natasha, and turned to leave the room, but Pierre held her hand. He knew he had something more to say to her, but when he said it, he was amazed at his own words. Stop, you have your whole life before you," he said to her. "Before me? No, all is over for me," she replied with shame and self-abasement. "All over," he repeated. "If I were not myself, but the handsomest, cleverest, and best man in the world, and were free, I would this moment ask on my knees for your hand and your love." For the first time in many days, Natasha wept tears of gratitude and tenderness, and glancing at Pierre, she went out of the room. Pierre, too, when she had gone, almost ran into the anteroom, restraining tears of tenderness and joy that choked him, and without finding the sleeves of his fur cloak, threw it on and got into his sleigh. "Where to now, Your Excellency?" asked the coachman. "Where to?" Pierre asked himself. "Where can I go now? Surely not to the club or to pay calls. All men seemed so pitiful, so poor in comparison with this feeling of tenderness and love he experienced, in comparison with that softened, grateful, last look she had given him through her tears. "Home," said Pierre, and despite 22 degrees of frost Fahrenheit, he threw open the bearskin cloak from his broad chest and inhaled the air with joy. It was clear and frosty. Above the dirty, ill-lit streets, above the black roofs, stretched the dark, starry sky. Only looking up at the sky did Pierre cease to feel how sordid and humiliating were all mundane things compared with the heights to which his soul had just been raised. At the entrance to the Arbot Square, an immense expanse of dark, starry sky presented itself to his eyes. Almost in the center of it, above the Prechestenka Boulevard, surrounded and sprinkled on all sides by stars, but distinguished from them all by its nearness to the earth, its white light, and its long, uplifted tail, shone the enormous and brilliant comet of 1812, the comet which was said to portend all kinds of woes and the end of the world. In Pierre, however, that comet with its long, luminous tail aroused no feeling of fear. On the contrary, he gazed joyfully, his eyes moist with tears, at this bright comet which, having traveled in its orbit with inconceivable velocity through immeasurable space, seemed suddenly, like an arrow piercing the earth, to remain fixed in a chosen spot, vigorously holding its tail erect, shining and displaying its white light amid countless other scintillating stars. It seemed to Pierre that this comet fully responded to what was passing in his own softened and uplifted soul, now blossoming into a new life.